So I'll go ahead and start introducing the session. So welcome to a deeper dive into leadership and igniting change. I'm Lee Nasahi. I'm the president and CEO of Vision Serve Alliance, and we're excited to share a preview of our conference coming up April 27th through May 1st in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's going to be an amazing event, opportunity to learn, to share, of course, always to network and have some fun too. So you're going to hear a lot of exciting things today about what we'll be doing at the conference, and we want you to share that news with everybody you know. We made the decision early on, pretty much right after the last conference, as soon as we could meet with our conference committee and staff, that the theme or focus of our next conference in 2025 was going to be on change and change management because the world is just full of change. It's hard to grab hold of anything these days, right? As we're meeting with our affinity groups, as I'm meeting with leadership teams of our member organizations, that's the number one thing everyone is grappling with, the speed of change and how to manage it. What does that even mean? How do we manage change? Well, we're going to learn about that. We were blessed early on again in this process to be introduced by one of our members and former board members, Erica Petak, to a pretty exciting model for change and a certified facilitator of that. The model's called the Leadership Circle, and I am really excited about this. I think you guys are going to love it. And Colin McLetchie, we have engaged as our facilitator. And much as we did last time with Janeway Skillern teaching us some new tips and tools, Colin's going to introduce us to this set of tools to the leadership circle. And immediately we're going to get to apply what we have learned to 6 of the most pressing areas, topics, sets of issues in our field. So I want to turn this over to our Vice President, Jason Eckert. He's going to share more about what this is going to look like. Jason?
Excellent. Thank you, Lee. And really just want to extend a welcome to everybody. Thank you for coming today to learn a little bit more about some of the unique practices that we're going to try to implement in this year's leadership conference. And just as Lee identified, identifying ways to ignite change in the community that we all work in and live in and interact in our professional lives and for many in our personal lives. Last year, if people remember at our open space conference, we identified a whole bunch of topics that needed addressing. And in a unique conference format, we're going to try to follow up on that and address those topics. So let me ask for our next slide, if I can. Excellent. So in our next slide here, it's nice and simple, but our conference is going to have 2 tracks. And you'll be able to choose which track you want to participate in before registering for the conference. There'll be the strategic discussion track and the presentation track. And then we will have an expanded keynote experience that will help us in this process of igniting change. Colin's going to talk about that experience in great detail. So I just want to identify the 2 tracks. If I can get the next slide, please. Excellent. So what is unique here is you'll sort of choose one track or the other. One track will be a presentation track, and one track will be a strategic discussion track. Both tracks will identify something related to the topics that we have on the screen, which I'm just going to read out loud to all of us here. The future of vision rehabilitation, a funding and healthcare debate. We've been talking about the vision rehabilitation process in healthcare for a long time, and we're going to have that as one of our topics. Innovative advocacy for accessible transportation. We've been talking about transportation barriers in our community for a long time, so obviously that is our topic. Leveraging evidence-based research and data. We've been talking about needing stronger evidence-based research to help us in our advocacy efforts and in our program development efforts. So we're going to talk about that. Aging and vision loss. That too has been a strong topic of conversation over the past few years. So again, we're going to engage in that conversation. Unlocking educational success from early childhood through college and employment. Again, we've had discussions related to these topics of improving the educational system so when folks exit with vision loss, they're able to successfully compete in a competitive job market, and a holistic approach to vision rehabilitation. Holistic meaning all the other things that are involved in a human life that we don't formally address in some of our vision rehabilitation services process. Things like our spiritual development or our social development or sort of some mental health needs or our athletics or healthcare outside of our vision issues. These issues come up so frequently, and the ways to address these issues and insert them into our understanding of vision rehabilitation and its care, that has that was a big issue in our previous conference that we wanted to bring forward. So again, in these strategic plans, we're going to try to figure out ways that we can change our organizations as they react to this, and also develop some more change in forming coalitions or committees around these topics as we move forward. So just to reiterate, before I hand it off to Colin, two tracks. In track one would be the presentation track. You'll participate in a presentation on each of these subjects developed by experts. And in track two, in this unique format, you'll participate in a long strategic discussion of about 5 hours, where you and the group will review these topics intently with some trained facilitators and then give a presentation to the overall general session on the ways that we're going to move these topics forward. Through all of this, we will use the change practices that Colin has identified for us in his 2 sessions that kick off the conference. And in that note, let me turn it over to Colin, who can tell us about the Leadership Circle and how we can use it to ignite change and the important topics we identified.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Lee. I am super excited to be a part of what I call this unconference. This is a really uniquely designed experience that will, we hope, really ignite and allow you to shepherd change both in your organizations and in the field more broadly, so that you can have the impact that you desire to have in the world. The world is getting increasingly complex, increasingly volatile, increasingly uncertain. And as leaders, as shepherds of your organizations, it is largely on your shoulders to be prepared, ready, fully engaged, and to do your work first before you can support others in doing theirs. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit about the Leadership Circle model, its 4 quadrants of change, and help you understand a little bit more about what it is we're going to be diving into in the conference. So on the screen here, you'll see that the Leadership Circle has created what they call the 4 quadrants of change, and I'm going to walk you through those real quickly. They've identified that there are 4 dimensions that we have to focus on if we're going to shepherd change efforts to make them transformational and sustainable, to actually get the results that we want to get. First, we have to focus on what they call the individual internal experience. In other words, the inner identity, the psychology, the spiritual, the cognitive, the inner operating system of all of the people impacted by the change has to be taken into account and has to be worked with. So this individual internal sense of who I am, what's the contribution I want to make, how things are changing, how does that impact me, how do I need to think, feel, and believe differently in order to make the change successful. So one of the things that I think is important to remember is that change is external, but transformation is internal. So the second quadrant of the 4 quadrants of change is the individual external. This is where we focus on skills, on behaviors, on peak performance, and it's usually a bit more concrete. We need to do things this way now, not the old way. We need to be moving into making these new things happen, not the things we used to make happen. But without the psychological and internal identity shifts, getting people to actually do the skills becomes increasingly more difficult. The third quadrant is what they call the collective internal. So now we're moving into the whole system or the whole organization or the whole initiative. And we're looking at things like the culture, shared symbols, the stories. We know that symbols matter. We know that logos and branding and all of this is important in creating a way of thinking about a company or a person or a brand. It's no different than when you're thinking about shepherding transformational change. The culture, the symbols, and the stories matter. And then the fourth quadrant is the collective external. This is where we focus on organizational design and workflows and policies and procedures and reward systems and performance management processes and all of the supporting mechanisms that hopefully will move us closer to what we want to have happen. Now, what the Leadership Circle has done is their research has shown that 85% of transformational change efforts fail, and they fail big time. We just don't get the results that we're looking for. And what they discovered is that that is because they ignore quadrants 1 and 3. We don't work with the collective and the individual internal transformation that needs to take place in order to make the change actually happen. So that internal transformation part of the process gets ignored. So when we only focus on the external and the skills and the systems and the org structures, we ignore the human system, and we do that at our peril. That's where we fail. So the Leadership Circle helps us focus with this model and with its leadership model on helping to transform ourselves and then shepherding others in their transformation to create more of what it is we're trying to create. A couple of foundational quotes that I love. One, you'll see here on the screen, no organization can move beyond the level of thinking of its most senior leadership. So Bob Adams and Bill Anderson, the creators of the Leadership Circle, have identified that if you're the most senior person on your team or in your organization, you are the limiter of what is possible. The way you think, feel, and believe creates, as they say, leaders bring the weather. And if the weather you're bringing is stifling change, stifling transformation, stifling ideas, then the organization cannot move beyond what you are capable of doing and seeing and thinking and feeling. Similarly, I love this quote from Jim Rohn on the screen. If you want things to change, you must change. And if you want things to get better, you must get better. The Leadership Circle provides us a model and framework to have the conversations about how we get better, how we scale and elevate our leadership. So fundamentally, there are two mindsets that are showing here on the screen. One mindset is what the Leadership Circle folks call the problem reacting mindset. And this is how it works. A problem or threat occurs in the world, something externally happens, and it triggers fear or concern or worry, whatever language you want to put around that. And we then react to that fear and we seek to make the problem or threat go away. That cycle is an anxiety containing cycle. In other words, what it's trying to do is contain anxiety. It's trying to make anxiousness go away. But the result of that is over time, you see peak periods of engagement followed by deep troughs of disengagement when there's no problem or threat or fear present. So that is one fundamental operating system that many leaders, many individual contributors on your teams and in your organizations are operating in. Something happens, we react to it through fear, we make the thing better, we solve the problem, quote unquote, but we see this cycle of engagement and disengagement because the problems just keep coming back. What they offer is a different operating system on which to boot up your leadership, to boot up your actual mind. And they call that the outcome creating mindset. It begins with a sense of purpose or vision to which we apply our passion, which drives our actions. And so we create what they call an energy unleashing system of mindset. Purpose and vision into passion, into action, which creates over time a sustained and upward trajectory of unleashing energy to create the results that we want. So we can either operate in a fear-based internal operating system that is seeking to play it safe, playing not to lose, or we can operate in an outcome-creating mindset where we're seeking to play with a deep sense of purpose and meaning, and therefore our actions align with that instead of trying to make problems go away. So if you want different outcomes, you need different conversations. And that's why this conference is designed differently to create different conversations around these 6 tracks. But the Leadership Circle shows us that the first conversation we need to have is with ourselves. And we do that through the Leadership Circle profile model. It is a universal leadership consulting model, and it is the world's only fully integrated leadership model and tool. I have been in HR and been out on my own as a coach and consultant and facilitator for about 10 years. I was in HR for 25 years. I've taken lots of 360s. I've taken lots of assessments and personality this and Enneagram that. And the Leadership Circle was what I call like doctorate level self-awareness. It showed me my stuff in a way that I didn't necessarily want to see, but the minute I saw it, I knew that I could work on what it was showing me. So as I tell people, the Leadership Circle profile, the truth will set you free, just not usually before it sets you off. But leaning into that developmental ouch and using a language and a framework around leadership that over 125,000 leaders have now used, and there are 2,000 certified practitioners in North America alone. And this has been used in over 1,400 organizations of all different kinds and shapes and sizes, industries and nonprofits and corporations across the globe. It offers us a way to talk about what is sometimes hard to explore. So on the screen, what this is showing is that the Leadership Circle is a circle. And what it shows us is what's going on, why it's going on, and what the pathway for change is. So let's keep diving in. The Leadership Circle is created, and on the screen you will see the creative competencies of leadership. So when we're operating above the line, as they call it, the circle is divided in half, top and bottom. Above the line is the creative competencies of leadership. So there are 5 dimensions: relating, self-awareness, authenticity, systems awareness, and achieving. And within each of those dimensions are competencies, a total of 18, that are associated with impactful and effective leadership. Things like fostering team play, selfless leader, systems thinking, strategic focus, purposeful and visionary, achieving results, courageous authenticity. Just as you listen to that language, I think all of us probably are going to hear that and say, yeah, that sounds like leadership. But what the Leadership Circle has also identified is that when we're operating in the lower half of the circle, on the screen here, is the reactive styles or the reactive tendencies. This is when we're operating in fear and playing it safe. And the 3 dimensions are complying, protecting, and controlling. And just as you hear that language, you start noticing, oh, that sounds and feels different. So in the complying dimension, we have our heart-focused leaders who really want to make others happy, and so they operate conservatively. They are pleasing others, they're seeking belonging and fitting in, and they tend to be more passive. Protecting leaders are our mind leaders. They're our smarts and experts, and they operate in distance, critical, and arrogance. And our controlling leaders, our force of will leaders, operate in autocratic, ambition, driven, and perfect. It's not that the reactive tendencies are bad and the creative competencies are good. It's that we often operate in the reactive tendencies unconsciously. We don't know that that's what's driving us, and therefore we can't make better, more effective conscious choices. And that's what the leadership wants to do, is elevate the consciousness of leaders across the globe to create more of what it is we want to create in the world. So we see above the line the creative competencies, below the line are the reactive tendencies. The inner game drives the outer game, according to Adams and Anderson. And so the fundamental question they ask, and that the leadership circle is designed to help us see, is, does our operating system have us, or are we operating it consciously? Are we in the driver's seat of our own leadership? The leadership circle on this slide shows us that there is also a left and right-hand side of the circle. People is on the left and task is on the right. So the most effective leadership, the most impactful leadership, is creative above the line leadership that blends both the people human system of leadership with the task driven necessary parts of leadership. So they're both essential, and most leaders have a preference for either people or task. And so this leaves us with 4 quadrants again. We have the people creative, we have the task creative. This is where we're operating above the line in our most aspirational leadership, our most impactful and effective leadership. When we are in the people reactive and the task reactive, we're putting the brakes on what is possible for us as leaders. So as we over-operate in the reactive tendencies, we're doing so at a cost to ourselves, to others, to our leadership, to the impact of the organization, to the teams and the people we lead. And the more we can access the creative, the less our leadership comes at a cost. They've also done research that shows there is a high level of correlation between these reactive tendencies and ineffective leadership, and the creative competencies and effective, impactful leadership. And I can't read all of the scores here for sake of time, but what is on the screen is showing that these dimensions of leadership above the line in the creative competencies, we see correlations, for example, in the achieving dimension of 0.91. So there is a nearly 1-to-1 relationship between leadership effectiveness and the achieving dimension of the leadership circle. Similarly, in the relating dimension, where we see things like care and connection and fostering team play, there's a 0.85 research-based relationship between effective leadership and outcomes in organizations and the relating dimension of leadership. So this is heavily researched and grounded in the reality of what's happening in organizations. And as Bill Anderson and Bob Adams say, effective leadership outperforms ineffective leadership every time. So they also did a research based on 486 organizations and subunits in those organizations based on 6 categories. On the screen are the categories: sales revenue, market share, profitability and ROA, quality of products and services, new product development, and overall performance. And they created this business performance index, or what they called the BPI. And so they took the profiles of the leaders in the organizations and did a scatter plot chart of all of the leadership circle profile results. And on the screen, they identified the top 10% of those leaders based on the performance in their organizations, and the bottom 10% of the leaders who have the weakest business performance. And they said, let's look at the profiles, the average or aggregate profile of the top 10% and compare it to the bottom 10%. So when they did that, here on the next slide, the bottom 10%, on the screen, it shows that so much more energy is going into the reactive tendencies. In other words, the bottom 10% of leaders are spending significantly more time in the reactive tendency energy, that mindset of problem, threat, reaction, which is dragging down the actual impact and performance of their organizations, versus in the top 10%, the aggregate model, what the screen shows is that there's much more energy in the upper half of the circle. The leaders are accessing the creative competencies much more frequently, much more consistently. So this all is to show that the model works, and that if we want more impact, bigger outcomes, we have to elevate ourselves first. So my offer to you for the first 10 people who are interested and reach out to me via email, my email is colin@fivewaysforward.com, and five is spelled out, and you'll have a copy of the presentation afterwards, and my email will be on there. I am happy to, for the first 10 people who email me, we can set up an hour-long time to debrief your self-assessment results. The Leadership Circle offers a free self-assessment that we're going to be using in the conference. There's also a 360 version that layers in other people's perspective. But for anyone who's interested, for $500, I will spend an hour with you to actually do a deeper dive in your Leadership Circle results. So the first 10 people who email me, we're going to provide the link in the webinar and afterwards where you can take the self-assessment. I'm happy to spend that time with you. For the first 10 people, I can do it at the $500. So hopefully you'll get that in, and I'll be able to meet some of you before the conference. So Jason, I'm going to turn it back over to you to tell them more about the conference.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Colin, for that introduction. And I just think about, some of the things that Colin had just suggested, again, as we now try to relate it to some of the discussions that we're going to have, at the conference. So let's just think about that for just a moment. I mean, Colin talked about, 85% of some of the attempts that we make to initiate change fail, right? So I've heard when we talk about all of these topics here, again, the healthcare topic, the transportation topic, the developing the research topic, aging and vision loss, education, and again, the holistic approach and getting that to have more value. I've heard so many times we've been talking about this, we've tried to do things, and those things have failed. And when Colin first shared with me about the sort of failure rates that occur in leadership moving these topic forwards, that's what resonated, and that's what started to change the thoughts of how we would develop the conference. Develop the conference by trying to use these techniques, applying them in the strategic discussions to ourselves, and then to, again, the community, the coalition, the group that we will form, or our agencies, to really try to move these topics forward, to really try to make change. When I think about his model of the reaction, and how we start to react to things, it's the same thing when I review our previous conversations. How frequently we see something that's a problem in the community and we seek to change it. But the overall systems that create it, we haven't had enough time being creative about and thinking broadly about in some of those ways. So sort of the outcome of that creative mindset is really important. And that's one of the things that we want to try to initiate in some of these discussions. So I just want to reiterate that that's where some of this came from. I also want to reiterate that some of this came from as I said, the open space forum. These were the topics that were the most well attended. These were the topics where the notes were the most robust. Some of you who attended that conference might notice that there is something that is not on the list that was very well attended, and that is the use of AI in the vision rehabilitation field, or how AI is improving the lives of folks living with vision loss. And that is true. We did take that out because so many of our other conferences and so many other national organizations have been focusing on that particular topic. So again, I just want to identify that this is the uniqueness of this conference. The conference will unfold in a way that will work with Colin in a keynote, and then we'll work with Colin and with some experiential interactive works amongst ourselves. Colin said if we want something to change, we have to change. Colin identified, sort of painfully, glossed over it this time, I know we'll spend time on it, that we as the leaders of our organizations, it's our limitations in thinking that sometimes holds the organization back. That's powerful. That can be painful. Check your ego at the door when you hear comments like that. But it's probably true. We have to establish teams that initiate change, coalitions, collaborations that will ignite change, that think beyond us. If the whole room agrees with us, we're probably wrong. We have to have a way where we're thinking bigger and broader than the imagination and the thought processes in our own mind, and we're assembling a team of people that help us initiate that, again, in our agency, in the community, or I should say, and on these topics that we'll identify. I hope these topics are passionate to you. I certainly have my passions on this list. We have pulled out lots of folks who are passionate about these topics, and they will give the presentations in the presentation section of the presentation track of the conference. And then those folks will come back in to the deep dive discussions, but they won't facilitate them. The facilitators of those discussions will be different folks who are trained in facilitation, most of them in our community. Most of them would be names that you would know. So these will be familiar folks who are passionate about these issues, who've worked really hard on them, to, again, in the presentation track, give you a good summary of where we are and what we're doing with them, or in the strategic discussion track, to participate in a conversation that is facilitated by other experts who, with the goal of moving these topics forward, of making change. At the end of the conference, the strategic discussion groups will put together a short presentation of how they're going to move forward, how they have applied Colin's techniques in their discussions, and how they've used that techniques to change the way that we're thinking about this, engaging our creative selves versus our reactive selves, stretching our leadership skills, and then committing to moving some of these forward. And we will present that in a group discussion. So again, the folks who participated in that presentation track, they'll have a familiarity with all of this, and then they'll hear where the deep dive discussion folks went, where the strategic discussion folks want to move forward, and we'll create opportunities to join those coalitions or committees or collaborations that already exist, or form new ones. So that becomes the overall structure of the conference, where we are really trying to ignite change in our community based on what we identified our community needs in our previous conference. I am thrilled and excited about all of this, and just can't wait to share it with the whole community. All the other trappings of a conference will be there. We can talk about that at the end if that's where our questions go. But at this point, we can shift into our questions and answers. We're right on time, so that's terrific. So I believe that Helen or Wendy are going to monitor the chat, take us off of the slides, and open us up for some discussion. So let them do that. And again, questions for me, Colin, Lee, open forum here.
I will share that I've gotten my first email for somebody who wants to sign up to be one of the first 10 to have the $500 deep dive conversation. everyone will have access to the self-assessment of the leadership circle. And then if you want to be in conversation with me to go a little bit more deeply and prepare for the conference and have a little bit jump ahead, we can certainly do that. So got my first person already, so I'm super excited.
If there are no questions, I
Actually,
can.
there is one.
Great,
Nancy Sharon,
terrific.
yeah, Nancy Sharon in the chat. Would you suggest this conference for middle managers, i.e., program directors? I would.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
The more people you have who are familiar with the model, who are engaged in these conversations, who get to have this experience together, I think just gives not only your organization but the whole system more energy and operating hopefully more above the line. So yes, the more you create the forward energy, I say the more the better. Lee, Jason?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our Vision Serve Alliance conferences, we always bill as leadership conferences, but we believe leadership is everyone's business. And the more members of your organization that participate in this learning and these conversations, the better.
Yeah, I gonna agree as well. And I say, leadership comes in all forms. If you're a middle level manager, some group of people report to you and they view you as a leader. And you're creating some programming or you're implementing some policy or procedure that that group is following. And the way you lead that group benefits your organization. The same thing with the outside committees, coalitions, that I keep talking about, those organizations require leadership, and leadership opportunities are abundant when you participate in a collaboration or a coalition or a committee that's trying to move an idea forward. So these skills are really extremely important no matter what level you are at within an organization. I agree.
Looks like people are curious if the presentation will be available, and the answer is yes. Thank you, Wendy and Helen. We will make this available to everyone afterwards, so you'll have it to share with others.
And we hope you'll do that.
Please do that. Yes.
I believe this presentation recording will also be posted on the conference website for everybody to check out, so they can learn, really be prepared for the leadership circle concepts that Colin's going to present at the conference.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in while we're waiting for you to formulate all your good questions. Um, there's a number of leadership tool models out there. One of them that I teach is the Leadership Challenge. And the Leadership Challenge and the Leadership Circle go hand in hand. I see it, there's nothing in conflict. In addition, I've read lots of books on change over the years, and the Leadership Circle reaffirms everything I've learned in that, in those books, and just has added to that. So I don't want anyone to, I'm hoping you won't leave this with the feeling like, oh, here's just another one of these things. I think this thing is really good, extremely valuable. It's scientifically based, lots of research on it, and it really just brings everything together that I've ever learned over the years. So I hope you will see that as an important opportunity for yourself. As Colin said, the change starts with us, and for a lot of people in your organization. I am hoping that many of you will come away from the conference and think, wow, this is something that we should really embrace at our organization and take it a little deeper. There are a couple of books that are written by the authors, the creators of the Leadership Circle that Colin mentioned, Anderson and Adams, and we'll share those as well on our website and during the conference too.
I also want to take a moment just to remind folks that and Colin, you can talk a little bit more about this, that the initial assessment that Colin was referring to is free, right? And we'll provide that that website where people can go and get their leadership circle profile. And I think we would certainly suggest that everybody does that before the conference, so they have some sense of where their strengths are within the quadrants and I guess the two hemispheres, creative versus reactive, people versus task. So I'm a creative task person, I'm a reactive people person. Unfortunately, I tend to be a reactive people person, so that speaks to me. Colin will help me with that in front of all of you when we work together. Um,
Oh,
but
yeah.
but but I think that would really help. And again, that is available for free. So the hope is that people who come to the conference will be able to gain that knowledge about themselves and participate in that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let's talk
thank you for mentioning that. We all took it at VisionServe, so we have our profiles, and we're looking forward to learning more about it as we go through the conference.
Yeah, and we're going to, I asked Lee and Jason both to take it, and I'm going to use them as live guinea pigs. And we're not going to have a conversation beforehand about their results so that we can do some live work in front of you all. They're going to be very courageous.
Oh
Um,
boy.
yeah, and really working with what they see in themselves and sharing a
Mhm.
little bit more deeply. So.
Yeah.
We have one more question here. Is there any formal guidance available for understanding the roles and goals of open space sessions or unconferencing events?
Um, I guess I don't want us to get tripped up. It's Jason. I don't want us to get tripped up on those phrases there. So the Open Space Forum is completed. The goal of that was our last conference was for us to gain an understanding as the organization that represents the agencies that serve people with blindness and vision loss across the country, blindness and low vision across the country, for us to understand what sort of you, the agencies, thought were the most important topics, the most difficult issues within your community, and how we can work with you to keep agencies healthy, to keep agencies functioning well, to better serve the population that we're all dedicated to serving. That was our goal for that conference, for the agencies to tell us what issues were the most important to them, for us to incorporate that back in the way that we strive to keep healthy organizations out there in the blindness community, and therefore to keep those communities, that community served very well by the healthy, strong organizations that we're helping create, right? So that goal has been achieved. As far as this conference and its unique style, it's the next step of that. It's starting to identify these are the goals that were important. These are the issues that were important, those issues that I had brought up on the screen and said out loud a couple of times. So the goal here is really to move the needle on those issues. Why is it, to ask the question, why is it that it's been so hard to create better transportation systems to assist non-visual non-drivers? Why has that been so hard, right? And then to look at Colin's example and say, well, we've tried so hard, but so much of it has failed. 85% of it has failed. Why has that happened? What can we do differently by using this model in the way that we work together? So that becomes the goal that hopefully will gain insights into ourselves, in our limitations and our strengths. We'll gain insights into our agencies, our local communities, insights and strengths that can come from there, and then we'll sort of work together as the community to go forward. And again, there's lots of collaborations, committees, organizations that are committed to this. We hope to join those teams or create those teams if they're needed within the topics that we have. So that's simply the goal. If these topics are all new to you, then there is the presentation track where you would say, I'm still new to this, or I don't understand this, or these topics are all interesting to me. I just want to learn from some experts. And you participate in that track. That track will give you sort of, what you'd imagine as an hour breakout session. And an hour breakout session led by an expert on each one of these topics moving forward. So if you say all these topics are interesting to me and I'm not ready to commit to one, then you'll participate in the presentation section of the conference, knowing that in the beginning of the conference, you'll learn a lot about yourself, your leadership style, and how to ignite change within yourself, your organization, and the community. And at the end, you'll hear the strategic discussion groups come back and say how they actually plan to do that. That's the goal of this conference. And then I want to say, raise your hand. Raise your hand and say, I heard all about these 6 topics. I like holistic approaches to vision rehabilitation the best. I think I would be the best leader there. I think I would move my agency in the most positive directions there. And I wish to participate in whatever has formed from that strategic discussion group. That's the hope. I know that's a little bit out there and not specific and concrete for what the conference is. If we need to talk about that, we absolutely can. Give that a couple of moments right before we conclude. Does that help answer the question to whoever asked it? And I know that
Yeah,
was
it
a
was
long answer.
Sarah. It was Sarah. And maybe I'll just add just a little bit more to
Please
that,
do.
Sarah, so that maybe the unconference part of this is rather than you sitting in sessions where experts just tell you everything, and a lot of conferences have interactive sessions now, so I don't want to suggest they don't. But in the breakout sessions where you take a deeper dive, you're going to have a series of hour-long sessions where you're working with probably the same group of people. We may have a few people go in and out. And everybody's equal there, right? We are going to have trained facilitators, as Jason said. We are going to have subject matter experts to present information, facts, strategies, but we all come to those discussions as equals, equal opportunity to share suggestions, ideas, brainstorm together as to how we move forward using, in particular, what we've learned from the leadership circle. So it's different in that way. It's more intense. Um, and we're hoping we will form some coalitions and groups who want to continue working on, in addition to the plans that are developed during the conference, we hope we'll get, um, sort of a core group of folks in each of those groups that want to continue meeting, working with Vision Serve Alliance and other members to further these issues.
So Lee, I think it's fair to say, as we've talked about this, that all the more reason to bring more people,
Oh yeah, because your
right?
agency probably deals with all these things.
That's right. And
That's right.
so if you want somebody who really, God, we really need to be in the education conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We really need to be in the transportation conversation. Then you'll have that opportunity. And then if you have somebody else who is maybe newer to your organization and still getting their footing, like Jason was saying, they could go to the presentation track and get more of a broad-based
That's right.
experience. But the whole intention of this is really to drive your missions forward in those 6 key areas that you
Yeah.
identified at the last conference, and really beginning to move into action planning and coordinating. And this is where Vision Serve Alliance, I think, has such a great role to play in being the togetherator, the bringing
Yeah.
together
The
of the
convener.
energy and the
Mm-hmm.
groups around these 6 topics that are so important to the industry.
That's right. Thanks. Thanks for that, Colin. Yeah, and I guess one other call to action. Um, I hope everybody knows this. Vision Serve Alliance conferences are open to everyone in our community. You do not have to be a member of Vision Serve Alliance to attend the conference. You get a better registration rate if you're a member of Vision Serve Alliance, but everyone's invited. And so I challenge you to think about each of those 6 topics. And if you are aware of some brilliant leaders out there working on any of these things, we sure like you to invite them to come and participate in this opportunity.
Excellent. So these are a little bit of the conference details. We have a quick moment, Lee, if you want me to do a run of show, you just want
Yeah, go ahead.
to run through those. Yep. So just to talk a little bit about how the conference will run. Here are our conference details. We're from April 28th to May 1st. We're at the DoubleTree Resort in Paradise Valley in Scottsdale, Arizona. I will say it is a beautiful location, really close to restaurants and shopping and all the great things that Phoenix and Scottsdale has to offer. It's a beautiful time of year to be in Arizona, so that's just another little plus. Just to gain a sense of sort of how this will flow for a member, for an attendee. You'll come in, on the first day. Most people arrive midday in the afternoon. There'll be registration, and then we will have a welcome event. So people participate in the welcome event. Usually it's from a sponsor. The sponsor talks a little bit, and we do a couple of activities there related to related to general things that happens at conferences, announcements, awards, all of those things will happen throughout the conference. The next day, right, because that's coming in the evening, the next day is when we start the morning with Colin's keynote address on the topics that we've had. Then we'll take a break, and then we'll have a leadership workshop by Colin. So it won't be more than just this presentation. It's when we'll start to interact with each other and work with each other. Then we'll break for lunch. We'll come back and basically we'll have our first two meetings. Our first two meetings in the presentations or our first two meetings in the strategic discussions, depending on which track you pick. And then if you're in the track with the strategic discussions, depending on which discussions you pick. That will take us to the end of the day. A great event in that evening, the Musical Instruments Museum is in Scottsdale, Arizona. It is a beautiful museum with terrific music history, a lot of audio presentations. We are going to have an off-site dinner there, and that should really prove to be wonderful. Excuse me. The next morning, there'll be a check-in. We'll all convene together, and then we will just make sure everything's going okay. And then we'll be back into our presentations or back into our strategic discussion groups for basically the next 3 hours or so. We'll have a break. We'll have some lunch. Then we'll come back and reconvene, and we'll work through the presentations and the closing and our implementation plans that Colin will help us execute as we sort of complete this part of the conference. The next evening, we have dine-arounds. People know that from our conferences where we cluster together and we eat at many different restaurants all around Scottsdale. Fantastic, wonderful eating. And then the next morning, we have our host agency site visit. The Foundation for Blind Children in Arizona is our host agency. They have a representative on the call today. We are thrilled to have them. Those who are interested in seeing their agency and looking at the outstanding work that they do, we board some buses. We head over there. We tour the facility in smaller groups. We come together and have a lunch together there, and then off to the airports or back to the hotel, depending on people's schedule. Sometimes we have to plan a business meeting that occurs, in the morning as well. So we might do that based on a specific benefit or a need that a subgroup of Vision Serve Alliance might have. But that's the construct of the conference. And again, it's really going to be terrific. I'm just looking forward to seeing so many of you there. Lee, let me toss it back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Jason. So all of you who are leaders out there, we just established that everybody on this call is a leader. Let's make some sunny weather for impactful change in our field, for ourselves, for our organizations, and most especially for our mutual constituents. Let's really move the needle and make life better for people living with blindness and low vision. This conference is just a piece of that puzzle, but we think it's an important one. So I'm going to encourage you to go and register if you have not done that. If you are a member, there is an early bird rate that is available to you for a limited period of time. So don't miss that. Take advantage of the discount you get as a member. And then please share the information about the conference that you've received. This presentation will be sent to you. It'll be on the website so you can point people to it to give them a better idea of what's going to happen. I want to thank Colin and I want to thank Jason for the information that you shared with us. And believe it or not, we're a little bit ahead of schedule. So we'll give it one more chance if anybody else has any other questions. I guess, there is one more thing we could do. I'd like to plug the fact that every year Vision Serve Alliance makes awards to significant people in our field, and that could be you too. I'd love for you to go and look on the website. The nomination period is open. Look at our awards and think, who do you know in this field that deserves some recognition for their innovation, for their passion, for their excellence in leadership? We'd love to hear from you, get some nominations of your colleagues. So that happens during the conference too. Thank you. Okay, and if there are no other
All
questions,
right.
I guess we are ready to close it out. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Colin. See you in
bet.
Scottsdale.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody.
Excited. We'll see you then.